Coming up with this week in computer hardware, SSD prices are dropping. AMD's Ryzen 3600, sweet spot or a bad idea? Speeding up SQL servers in your giant Excel spreadsheets, Fairphone III, Apple battery security, and be quiet's darkness. All that and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 531, recorded on August 29th, 2019. Approaching Shrout's Law. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Mint Mobile. They provide the same premium network coverage you're used to, but at a fraction of the cost because everything is online. Mint Mobile makes it easy to cut your wireless bill down to just $15 a month with their 3-month introductory plan, and get the plan shipped to your door for free at mintmobile.com/twitch. And by Plex. With Plex, you can organize and stream your personal collection of movies, TV shows, music, and photos anywhere on any device. Plex is offering Twit listeners a 30-day free trial of Plex Pass, which gives you access to all their premium features. Go to plex.tv/twit and enter in the code TWIT to start your free trial today. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twit's weekly show that brings you hardware news, people. We're talking desktops, laptops, SQL servers, mayhem, the disappointment of certain organizations and the security of their firmware, software, which impacts your firmware. But we'll get into that in a second. Right now, we're going to talk about SSD prices and memory prices dropping through the floor. Joining me with a smile on his face and a song in his heart, PC Purse Editor-in-Chief Sebastian Peak. How are you, sir?
Good. I'll just go with that. That's my frame of mind. The song and the other thing you said. Yeah.
Smile on your face, song in your heart.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the smile on my face. Yes.
Yeah,
I will
you're
adopt
neither
a
smiling
smile.
nor looking all Jiminy Cricket at all. That's probably because of your tremendous disappointment that we seem to actually be reaching Shrout's Law, the sub 10% price per gigabyte on laptops. There's some interesting stuff. Memory prices seem to be falling, as in demand is falling and capacity is finally at a place where there is enough capacity to create an excess of memory. We've heard about some companies throttling back their production to help keep prices up. Tom's Hardware had a nice link, or I should say Tom's Hardware took inspiration from a DRAM exchange post. First up, traditional rotating hard drives are pretty much dead, and DRAM Exchange said earlier this week that they expect 512 gigabyte and 1 terabyte SSDs to be below 10 cents by the end of this year, or I should say 10 cents per gigabyte by the end of this year. And there's a fantastic quote, if you're into sort of marketing, economic business speak. Weakened stocking momentum due to the cautious stance of PC, smartphones, and service data center OEMs towards the end market sales and high inventory levels, leading to an overly oversupplied NAND flash market, price wars by leading SSD suppliers who are keen to get their 64-72-layer stocks off their hands, and the price comparison effect as a result of Intel 3D QLC SSDs.
Yes.
So what that essentially means, whether or not you're looking at the original article up on DRAM Exchange or Tom's Hardware analysis of that, is that 128 gigabyte SSDs finally are going to die the wasting death they should have met a few years ago, because 512 gigabyte SSD prices are going to drop. So that should be kind of the new standard for entry level, which is great if you're trying to buy affordable systems. And of course, hard disk drives are what little advantage they have in capacity, unless you're going for a big 2 terabyte, 4 terabyte drive, they are probably just going to fall off the face of the planet by the end of this year and the beginning of next year. I'm really kind of curious to see how this ends up. DRAM Exchange is a division of TrendForce, and the NAND flash industry this year is clearly exhibiting signs of oversupply. So 3 cheers for price wars, too, between vendors. Mainstream 128, 256, 512 SSDs have fallen a long way by over 50% since peaking in 2017. So this is pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited about this. Do you care?
much. I do, because I mean, at this point, I don't know if that's true as of this second as I say this, but in the last few months, the only SSD you've been able to buy at about 10 cents per gig that was a modern like NVMe M.2 drive, PCI Express storage, was that QLC Intel drive, the 600p.
Right.
And that's been driving pricing down, I think, at least to some extent. I mean, that sits there at $99 all the time on Amazon and Newegg and everywhere. And then you have these other options that might be using TLC memory or flash storage, I should say, and might have faster overall performance, like significantly faster random performance. And those prices have been dropping and dropping. I haven't quite seen them down to that 10-cent level, but if that's what we get to, if it's just going to be a commodity thing to just go out and buy a TLC 512 gig drive for 10 cents a gigabyte, that's going to be a great thing for consumers, obviously. And it's absolutely possible to back a QLC drive into the corner where, depending on what you're doing, it might have about the same performance as a hard drive.
Right.
Or in some cases, possibly even lower performance than a spinning hard drive. But that's why I'd like to see more options than just that one Intel 600p that's been sitting there at 10 cents a gig. So that's good.
Well, I mean, looking at Amazon, right? Samsung still has a fairly hefty premium compared to a bunch of the other drives out there on sort of the 860 level, right? 860 EVO at 1 terabyte is $140. Crucial MX 500, $97. Western Digital Blues are $110. SanDisk is back up to 115. They were a little bit lower. I don't know. It's been interesting because the prices have been. If you're watching the video, you're seeing me make this hand gesture that looks like some sort of water snake or porpoise bounding through the waves. But the prices have been really, at least in the last couple of weeks, the ones I've been looking at, they've been kind of messy. They've been up and down and up and down. But, to think of where 1 terabyte drives were a year ago versus where they are right now, it's a pretty healthy drop. I'm very curious to see how a lot of this shakes out, because it's funny because some people are still trying to sell like Samsung 840s online for what I would call a somewhat inflated price for what it's worth. The other thing that TrendForce talked about was that PCIe is essentially going to replace SATA in the mainstream because the pricing on those drives have gone down so far. I don't know. I'm excited for all rotating media drives to go away, at least until I have to recover data from a dead drive. Then I remember why I back everything up.
I still like my cold storage. It's getting cheaper and cheaper to buy huge hard drives. You can buy an 8 terabyte external drive when they're on sale for around $140, $150.
Right.
Actually, I think I saw 10 terabyte drives a couple months ago on sale for like $159. So
that's
if you're just going for very big external storage. That was a Western Digital Easy Store drive at Best Buy, I think. But yeah, they fluctuate. I'm sure you'll see stuff by the end of the year that's around $150 for that much storage. But that's the appeal. Yeah.
Western Digital Reds are not going away for NAS boxes for anybody anytime soon. Certainly not for me. Oh, no. I'm not, going to replace the 6 and 10 gigabyte drives. I should say on one NAS I have 4 and 6 gigabytes, and the other NAS 10 gigabyte drives that are populating that simply because A, the capacity isn't there at the high end, and B, the cost is prohibitive. You can almost, somewhere around 2 terabytes, you can almost kind of be like, well, it's close. But by 4 terabytes, the SSD numbers will make your eyeballs bleed right out of your skull in fear and loathing. I got the weirdest email. Central Computers is the local PC part supplier of choice. And I was laughing. Let me see if I can pull it up. Because they sent this email. It's like, look what we have. Come get your 3900X while supplies last.
Oh, nice.
And I feel like they bought one for like $900 off of eBay just so they could send that email out. And I'm not trying to diss Central Computer because you guys have saved me more than once and their prices are usually pretty reasonable. But I was laughing at the idea of this super small local vendor actually having a 3900X. Because, one of the things I read earlier this week that I've been thinking about is, these parts came out like 7/7/2019, July 7th, and there has been, for all intents and purposes, no availability on 3900X parts and limited scattered availability on 3700X. You can still. Okay, so you can still go to a micro center, right? They've been pretty good because they're not selling online. If you have a physical micro center store, you can go in and buy an AMD Ryzen 9 3900X or 3700X. Amazon, I don't think, has anything higher than, it looks like right now, Ryzen 5 2600 maybe. I take that back. Oh, hey, they got 3700Xs back in stock today for $330, which is a reasonable price. 3800Xs have been pretty available. And Newegg has 3700Xs in stock too. That's pretty awesome. I bring all of this up is mostly to get to the subject you got deep on PC Per this week, which was the Ryzen 5 3600X, your review, and you called it the gaming sweet spot, but with a question mark.
Right. Well, the question mark. Well, I think the biggest issue with this is that the 3600 exists. So you have the 3600X, which was launched at $249. It's a 6-core, 12-thread part. Then you have the non-X variant, which differs in only two ways. In the TDP, which is 65 watts for the non-X part and 95 watts for the X. And then in the clock speeds, which are only 200 megahertz apart. So you go from 3.6 gigahertz base to 3.8, and from 4.2 gigahertz boost to 4.4. And that's what your $50 gets you. Now, in theory, I know in the previous generations, there's been differences with overclocking and some of the additional boost capabilities of the X series parts, but here it's a much smaller difference. And what kind of was interesting to me going through this, because obviously the 3600X has been out for a little while now, but pricing has actually dropped a little bit on this. When I was looking yesterday, the 3600X was just selling for $10 less all of a sudden, $239 on Amazon, and that was the ships and sold by Amazon. So I'm thinking that might be a trend. Let's see what pricing is right now. Yeah, still $239. So so at that price, you're thinking, okay, a $39-ish to $40 difference to get slightly higher clock speeds. It's still kind of a stretch because, and I don't have a non-X 3600 here to test, but just 200 megahertz difference is not going to be that huge when you're gaming, especially. But I went through and I did some basic gaming tests. I used the same 4 gaming benchmarks I did with the initial Ryzen 3000 launch. And then when I went through and did some CPU benchmarks, I did something different because now we've gotten to the point where I think we're on our 4th revision of what is known as a GC Code, AGE SA, and I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's basically AMD's processor microcode, like firmware updates that get handed down by your BIOS, your manufacturer of your motherboard. You do a BIOS flash, and you're on a new GC Code version, which has pretty much been the case ever since these launched. So we started off with a GC. It's a combo update 1.0.0.2. That was the original launch version, or rather the pre-launch version. So people like me who had the processors early, we were running this version. Closer to the actual release, and anybody, I guess, who waited till the night before to do their benchmarking, we're probably on version 1.0.0.3, which now has multiple letter variants appended to it. This is all very exciting stuff, I'm sure. Anybody who's listening is riveted by this.
It's important, though.
It is important. It's very important because
the AMD generic encapsulated system architecture, right, which is, what gets handed to motherboard vendors, which then turn it hopefully into something that performs at the memory speeds and processor performance you want. But this was a big deal for anybody trying to run faster memory when the Ryzen parts launched 2 years ago. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things you get with the more mature versions of this is better memory performance stability, the ability to have higher memory clocks running stable. this also affects the performance of the CPU. It affects the voltage that your CPU runs at, both at idle and load, and it affects its boost characteristics. What's interesting about this is that AMD does not publish any release notes for any of these AGESA versions that come out. You get it from your motherboard vendor. You can identify which version you're running. It does stuff, but they don't tell you what stuff it does. They're very vague about it, which is unfortunate. I would love to be able to dissect it and say, oh, well, in this version, they've tweaked the core voltage to this at idle, and the state tables have changed or something for the way that it boosts. But I'll get to that in a moment. Actually, what's on the screen right now, if you're watching the video, is a comparison of the exact same Ryzen 5 3600X being run on the same motherboard. The only difference is which version of the AGESA combo update was running on the board, and it was 1.0.0.2, the pre-launch, versus 1.0.0.3 AB. And since AB, there have now been ABA, which was pulled, and now ABB, which was the one that went out and nicely disabled PCI Express 4.0 across the board. So actually running this 3600X on an X470 gigabyte board, I have full PCI Express 4.0. I'm running a PCIe 4.0 SSD. Everything works just fine. Great memory compatibility. Then you go off and update to the latest version from your vendor, and all, the PCI Express 4.0 stuff is taken away. Not that that really matters, but 1.0.0.2 had very, very different voltage characteristics with this CPU. It liked to live up closer to 1.475, 1.48 volts. And even at idle, it was living somewhere between 1.45 and 1.475 and spiking very close to 1.5 as often as it needed to. And with the new version, the .3 AB, it was capped at 1.4. It seemed like a hard cap. So no matter what, it never spiked above 1.4. It actually spent quite a bit of time at 1.4, even at idle. It would drop down to like 1.425. But 1.44 is about where it wanted to be. And this is a pretty significant drop in voltage. And that makes sense when you look at the performance numbers, because under load, of course, is where it's going to impact performance. And you saw the same spiky behavior on the pre-launch version .2, where it was going up as far as it needed to. Like 1.48 was a pretty common voltage under load, and the new version .3 AB was again capped at 1.44. It never seemed to rise above that at all. So what this results in is some higher boost clocks. It's sustaining higher boost clocks, not by a huge margin, but if you're talking like 40 or 50 megahertz, that's not going to make a huge difference in games. But when you start running very CPU intensive, benchmarks and doing things like video encoding, or transcoding, I should say, which is where I saw the biggest impact, it's like looking at benchmarks without any sort of mitigations enabled, and then looking at benchmarks with every single processor mitigation enabled on an Intel system, where you could potentially lose. We talked about this in the past. I think Phoronix did a really comprehensive write-up of the impact of the latest round of mitigations that affected multi-threaded performance for Intel, and they were losing up to, I think, like 14% in some benchmark instances, where this AGESA code change saw, if we're looking at Cinebench, almost no change. It was a few points, single-threaded versus multi-threaded, and multi-threaded especially. I ended up running the benchmark 6 times and averaging those numbers because they were so close that it was basically tied, although the original AGESA version ended up with a slight edge. Moving on to something else, file compression, we saw a much more noticeable difference, where now it's not a rounding error anymore. It's noticeable, but not huge. It was the 3600X running the newer version of that microcode was slightly slower, but not too bad. When we move down to the X264 benchmark, that is basically just the results of 4 consecutive 2-pass runs of doing some transcoding at 1080p using H264. Pretty common task, something you might do in Handbrake. we see the 3600X, which was pumping along at an average of 143 frames per second for the first pass and about almost 34 frames per second on the second pass, which is always slower. All the way down 10 frames per second lost on pass 1 and only a fraction lost on the second pass. So that first pass, though, losing 10 FPS, it took a lot longer to complete the benchmark. So you've lost place on the chart. Like the 3600X was beating out a Core i7 9700K, the Ryzen 7 1800X, the Core i7 8700K, which is another 6-core 12-thread part. That's the Intel. And it was at 142.75 frames per second for the first pass of this. And then you go all the way from beating those processors to trailing them and being just a little bit fast. Well, still considerably faster than the Ryzen 5 2600X, but not beating out Intel Core i7s. So it seems like the initial launch of these processors and what the press had to work with originally, some of those benchmark numbers are a little inflated once you actually drop the core voltages down a little bit, which limits the frequencies a little bit. So it's going to behoove everybody who has these benchmarks and these samples to go through and retest everything. I've been kind of putting it off. I've been dragging my feet for this exact reason because AGESA
just in
changes.
Case 1.0.0.3.ABAB comes out.
Because ABA came out and I couldn't read on the entire test suite then, and then they pulled it, and then they put out ABB, and now at this point I'm waiting for ABC or, heaven forbid they actually change the version number and maybe just do .4 and call that the final fully baked version of this. Because they're go ahead.
I'm sure they have their. I'm sure they have their reasons for the lettering system, and I'm sure they have reasons which we would not be particularly thrilled with, as far as the secrecy, the hidden nature of what these AGESA updates are doing. Part of me is looking at this, and there's not a huge delta between the 3600 and the 3600X, right? It's like right now, a 3600 is $197.85 on Amazon. 3600X is $240. But you don't get into it in your article, but it's amazing how close these two parts are when you look at some of the benchmarks. I'm kind of over here, one corner of my eyeball, looking at sort of the user benchmarks up on like user benchmarks, and there's a couple other sites. And these are not, there's not a huge difference in the performance on these parts. And there's certainly been a lot more 3600s sold than 3600Xs. And then there's that big old jump between the 3600X, which is $240, and the 3700X, which is $330, which delivers a considerable bump in performance over the 3600 or the 3600X. This is, part of me is like, I'm not sure there's much point in, I think I'd rather have more memory or throw the money at a GPU if I was looking at between a 3600 and a 3600X. And B, though, what you may not have said, you may not have said it quite directly, but implied when you said you need to retest everything, is that maybe AGESA was tuned for review performance at launch, and now they're dialing it back a bit for sort of overall stability or longevity ? It just seems odd.
In fact, they've actually explicitly said it was for longevity, that we want these CPUs to run at a lower voltage to preserve their life. Well, right, after all the reviews have been published. It's a very negative sort of, you could look at it as being a negative outlook on it, or at the same time, it's just experience. This is not hot, like higher frequencies on press BIOS for a graphics card is something I've experienced. And it's unfortunate. Because I guess this becomes like your position on a chart matters more than what users will actually experience. But really, this is a fantastic product. They didn't need to do this. It could have been if really they thought the safe limit of this was 1.44 volts from the outset, just set it that way. Although I will say, in their defense, I don't think anybody who was buying this CPU at launch and running the latest version of whatever BIOS their vendor supplied was running 1.0.0.2. I mean, there were some that were a day or two behind, I think, and there absolutely still are these older updates available. I know Gigabyte still has everything from the pre-launch .2 all the way up through .3 ABB, but you know, if it was indeed limiting people to 1.44 volts with this part the day they took it home, then, you know, I guess it's forgivable. But like you said, like the reviews are already out there. The press was using this older version of the GC code. I think somewhere in my article I linked to this, but Gamers Nexus, they did a pretty extensive video, like 20-minute long video about these GC code changes, and pretty much said the difference was slight. The main difference is the voltage. They saw like 40, 50 megahertz difference, like the delta between the two. But really, their money is on the non-X variant of this CPU anyway, which I completely agree with. Like you've been saying, you're paying a $40 or $50 premium for a minuscule improvement in performance, and the book is still open.
Like in gaming benchmarks, 3%, 5%. It's one. I mean, to amplify what you're saying is I think it's cheap of AMD to do this, and B, a lot of the sort of steps between like the 3600 and the 3600X, the 3700X and the 3800, you're paying more money for a minuscule return. Like, you know, okay, the 3800s had better availability than the 3700X, but a big part of that is nobody wants to pay the extra money for a 3800 part that basically runs the same as the 3700X. And I don't see any point in paying the extra money for the 3600X over the 3600. It makes me wonder, like, you know, could AMD have done more to sort of give you a better performance story, you know, as they name things between a 3600 and a 3600X, between a 3700X and a 3800, rather than having these alarming, or I should say 3800X, you know, because like a 3800X is a $60 or $70 delta over a 3700X, and you're basically getting the exact same performance, you know.
To further complicate things, they're going to be peppering in some non-X variants. You know that's going to be coming. I've seen on Twitter, if you follow some of the data miners out there, there have been references to things like, I think, a non-X 3700, and then certainly a 3500, which is a non-X part. So that's going to be a really interesting part, especially if they're going head-to-head with a product like Intel's Core i5 9400F, which has been selling for $149 for months now, and as a 6-core Core i5 part, $150 would be a great basis for a gaming system. And Intel has very good performance in gaming. They were still on the top of these charts. And by the way, if you're listening, any of the results in gaming, think 3700X minus a frame per second or two. It's very close. Just behind the 3700X sits the 3600X in our gaming charts. But the interesting thing to me is really going to be what happens when Zen 2 drops below $200. What happens when it's available for $149 if they're indeed going to compete with that very aggressively priced Intel part. And Intel at this point, they don't really have an answer at the high end of this Ryzen desktop stack. So they're going to have to respond by lowering prices. We've already seen a very small price reduction, but just overall about a $10 or $15 reduction in prices. I know the 9900K has been selling for about $485 pretty much since the Ryzen launch, which, you know, it's only $15 off, but it's still, it has its own merits in certain things versus a 3900X. But when you're talking about multi-threaded applications, it just mops, the 3900X mops the floor with 9900K. At about the same price. So they're going to get either really aggressive on price, or we're going to see a brand new lineup of things that have more cores available, which would be exciting. But yeah, I mean, AMD's product stack right now is a little odd because, like you said, there's big differences in price, small differences in performance. And that begs the question, like, well, how low can you go? Because really a 3600 is so close to a 3600X. And even a 3600X is so close to a 3700X. If all you're doing with this thing is basic productivity and gaming, go with the 3600. Save your money, buy a better graphics card. You don't get a whole lot more out of it. In fact, there were plenty of instances where the 3900X was not the fastest in a given game. And that's by a very small margin. You might be getting slightly higher clocks with one of the lower CPUs because the 3900X has a slightly lower clock than, say, the 3800X because it's just a more complex part. Its voltage drops under load because it's having to feed so many additional cores. Doesn't run quite as fast as far as frequency goes, but you more than make up for it with multi-threaded optimized applications. But I guess my point is, if you're just gaming and you've seen the benchmark results, and we run these benchmarks at ultra settings at 1080p simply to try to make the CPU the bottleneck. And it's been suggested that I run an even higher end graphics card, go to a 2080 Ti, and then run the games at 1280 by 720 just to absolutely ensure that you're up against a CPU bottleneck, which would be kind of funny. Just maybe even run it 540 or 480 at that point and see some crazy FPS numbers, but you're not hitting a wall with even the cheapest Ryzen CPU at this point. It's not holding you back. It's significantly faster than the previous generation. If you've been on the fence about upgrading, even if you don't want to spend a lot of money and you were on a fairly high-end processor before with the previous generation, I would say it's a toss-up if you want to get this over a Ryzen 7 2700X. Because there are instances where that is still faster because it has 2 more cores. But if you are on a first-generation Ryzen part, this is faster than even the 1800X. And you could probably say the same with the 37 or the 3600 non-X. Or maybe even the mysterious 3500, which may or may not be coming, that I've seen rumored. So I'm just going to add more and more SKUs at every price point
till everyone is terribly confused. Oh my goodness! So if you were paying attention, you may have realized that Amazon purchased Eero not too long ago. Eero, of course, being probably the first notable mesh network manufacturer targeting the consumers. It started out, if memory serves, as a Kickstarter or Indiegogo project. It was long enough ago that the memory is kind of fading, and it doesn't really matter because they are through that phase. They delivered their product. They've launched. And so of course since been sold to Amazon. Amazon of course always wants to make more money, so they've offered, like many of their competitors in the mesh world, some security features that you can have if you pay a subscription fee. So, there are Eero Secure Plus. Isn't that right up on CNBC about this? And phishing warnings, malware warnings, VPN access. And I guess Amazon bought them back in February, and then Tuesday this week they decided to make these offerings. The timing feels like this is probably was in the pipeline for Eero for quite some time. Eero Secure Plus will be known as Eero Plus. And the basic difference is that you get a VPN from encrypt.me, and $2.99 per month for Eero Secure, or $30 a year. Eero Plus will be $10 a month, or $100 a year. You got to kind of dig into your account to sign up for these. I think it's interesting to watch because there's been some analysis recently that points out something that we've known and talked about on This Week in Computer Hardware for a while, which is that a lot of, for example, router vendors, they release a router, maybe do one update to clean up some really, really nasty problems, and then they tend to not get updates over time. That has not been the problem with the mesh services because they are offering, in many cases, with a significantly higher price, significantly better support. But it's interesting to watch, as they start to okay, we're going to have this child, we're going to make the internet safe for your child for $3 a month. We're going to, make everything secure for $10 a month. We've seen standalone appliances trying to bring network security. It's interesting to watch. I also think it's really funny that they won't actually let you see the plans for Eero unless you're actually logged into your account. Well, I should say they will, but they don't get too deep in the details. It basically says advanced security, safe filtering, ad blocking, and activity center to see what's using your network, which personally I think actually should be sort of standard in any expensive mesh routing system. They add in a one password on the Plus. They add in one password, the encrypt.me VPN, and malware bytes. I don't know. I think it's curious to watch. Eero has always had a decent interface and solid performance, not nearly as good as Netgear's Orbi system in terms of overall performance. But everybody wants to find a way to make more money. But the 3 Eero Pros is $500. Which is what you're using if you want the sort of, if you're watching the video, the 3 big blocks that you're seeing in front of you, which is more than enough to cover most homes. They also have the Pro and the Eero beacons, which is significantly less expensive. I'm currently running a Netgear Orbi system in my house. I've run at least 6 different mesh networking systems in here, and I've been experimenting with new ways of testing performance beyond straight sort of, maximum bandwidth speed burns between 2 computers, because some of these don't do as well as soon as you start doing things like running multiple video streams plus trying to move high-speed data, but that's a conversation for another day. In any case, expect to see more of this stuff in the Internet of Stuff, and if you haven't checked your router in a while, check to see if there's been a firmware update anytime recently, just to see what's available and whether or not you should be updating your hardware that keeps your home network secure.
I will add briefly, Jim on our staff, Jim Tanis, who actually owns the site, back in 2017, he did some bandwidth testing. He did all this mesh network comparison because apparently he hates Joy, and he spent weeks arduously testing from every different location and getting these numbers, real world numbers in a house with a mesh network. And we both know how painful network, especially wireless testing, can be. But the Eero stuff, that was, this is 2017 era, but it was the fastest of the group. He was testing against Amplify and a Google Wi-Fi home network, and it was giving significantly better bandwidth. I, of course, am currently running the Google Wi-Fi system that was used for those tests, and it's okay. It's not great. Certainly not what you get if you want pure speed. But I'm always interested in mesh networks that provide better bandwidth, because I can't even max out a gigabit connection from my NAS over this thing. I'm running maximum, I think, about 54 megabytes a second transfer speeds. It's not great.
Eero is a sponsor of the Twit network. I want to make that clear in case anybody thinks we're not doing our diligence on that. In terms of, I've never been a fan of Google's mesh system. I think it's, like much of Google's hardware, is not particularly fantastic for the price. I will say, by the way, if you're interested in a Pixel 3, there's a $300 discount on that this week if you've been thinking about buying a high-end phone. In terms of overall performance, because of the way they engineered the backhaul, the wireless backhaul in the Netgear Orbis, it is significantly outperformed every other mesh networking system I've tested.
Interesting.
I've tested, and that came out long after Jim's 2017 article. It's I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30% faster than everything else out there. A lot of it depends on your home, the configuration, how you lay the mesh network out, and that can have a dramatic impact on the performance of any router or mesh networking system you deploy in your home. Did you see the article? I think TechRadar picked it up, some other places. NVIDIA's latest graphics driver update was just ruining frame rates on some games.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly, there have been some performance issues reported with AMD as well. And the reason for this new graphics driver update for both of these companies is this game called Control that just came out.
Right.
And Control while like AMD is claiming they got 10% better performance than the pre-launch driver that they had, that press may have had, and then this new 19.8.2 boosted that performance with on NVIDIA's side. It's just like their standard, here's your day one driver support for this brand new game that we've been optimizing for. They've been having some issues with, for example, Fortnite, where Fortnite is, I don't know if it's specifically stuttering or if it's just lower frame rates. I haven't done any testing. On the AMD side, they have in their release notes for the new driver specifically brought up the fact that certain games were having lower than expected performance or stuttering, and Fortnite was mentioned as minor stutter may be experienced during the first few minutes of Fortnite gameplay. So I wonder if there's some correlation between control and lower performance. I don't know. It seems ridiculous, especially across two different vendors. But yeah, I had noticed on the AMD side, and then I see these articles that you linked to about NVIDIA driver performance too. So unless you're running that new game Control, then you want to be on an older driver version right now until the next revision or hotfix comes out. So 19.8.1 or before if you're on AMD. And what are they on with Intel? Is it like 4 NVIDIA? It's like 431.02 or something, 461.02.
They just roll right off the tongue.
Yes.
And I just closed the link, which makes me feel super awesome about that. I would have to go back to NVIDIA's website, which would make me burst into tears.
Yeah, I'm on the Tech Radar article, and they don't actually name the driver version. So I have to look it up.
So annoying. Remember 10th generation CPUs we were talking about last week? Lenovo's ThinkPad X1 Carbon and X1 Yoga are getting Intel's latest 10th gen chips too. We talked about a bunch about what was coming from Dell. Project Athena labeling on the Carbon, which is a sort of guarantee of 9 hours of battery life, amongst other things. Those are going to be shipping in September. Other interesting thing is the ThinkPad L13 and L13 Yoga are some pretty big updates from the L390, which you've probably seen if you've been shopping at the more bargain end of the laptop universe. Brighter displays, really, really nice screens. They added the Think Shutter cover for the camera. Those are going to be selling for $749 and $919 for the Yoga starting in October. The other thing that came out this week is the crew over at Dell has done some interesting stuff with building Chromebooks for the enterprise and essentially offering the same hardware that will be available to run either Windows or the Chromebook. That's actually pretty exciting to kind of, if you are administrating large amounts of devices out there. And we should probably talk about the Solution Center if you're on Lenovo, or if you're running older Lenovo hardware. Quote, a vulnerability reported in Lenovo Solution Center version 03.12.003, which is no longer supported, could allow log files to be written to non-standard locations, potentially leading to privilege escalation. Lenovo ended support for Lenovo Solution Center and recommended that customers migrate to Lenovo Vantage or Lenovo Diagnostics back in April of this year. So if you are running a Lenovo system and you have Lenovo Solution Center, get rid of it and get an updated bit of software to make your life less terrifying. Lenovo Diagnostics and Lenovo Vantage are safe and good to run. Uninstall Lenovo Solution Center from your system if it's on there. Just want to give you guys a heads up on that. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware brought to you by Mint Mobile. If you're still using, I'm not going to name them. You know who they are. They're big. They've been doing mobile service for forever. They probably are charging you more than you want or need to be paying for your mobile service, which is why you should be taking a look at Mint Mobile. You know, people know you'll pay. Oh, it's changing carriers is such a pain. Actually, it's not. Mint Mobile, they provide the same premium network coverage you're used to, but at a fraction of the cost because everything at Mint Mobile is online. No retail locations, no big giant overhead, and they pass those savings directly to you, right? take a look at an MVNO like Mint Mobile. They make it easy to cut your wireless bill down to just $15 a month with their 3-month introductory plan. Every plan comes with unlimited nationwide talk and text, and you won't have to pay for unlimited data you don't use. If you don't use data, don't pay for it, right? You can choose between plans with 3, 8, or 12 gigabytes of 4G LTE data, and you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan. Keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts. It's easy. Ditch your old wireless bill. Start saving with Mint Mobile. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month with their 3-month introductory plan and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/twitch. That's mintmobile.com/TWICH. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month with their 3-month introductory plan at mintmobile.com/twitch. And we want to thank Mint Mobile for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. I love saving money on phone bills. It makes me so happy. Did you hear about the update of the Fairphone III? No? This is exciting.
Tell me more.
Or not exciting. So a while back, a group of lovely human beings decided that phones needed to be repairable. Phones should be repairable. Phones should be sourced from responsibly sourced recyclable materials. So the Fairphone III is going to be available September 3rd, starting at 450 pounds. Nice right up on the verge. It's been 3 years since the last Fairphone. So the last Fairphone was announced back in 2016. And it gets a 10 out of 10 repairability score from iFixit, who has been a sponsor of This Week in Computer Hardware, and a site I'm a huge fan of, period. So the flip side, though, is they stopped supporting the Fairphone, the 2013 Fairphone in 2017, because they couldn't afford to continue to make spare parts. So this is not exactly flagship hardware. Snapdragon 632, 4 gigabytes of RAM, 64 gigabytes of storage. I think 4 gigabytes of RAM is enough for most people. 64 gigabytes of storage is a nice start. There's a 3,000 milliamp hour removable battery that's easy to replace. If you're curious about this, if you want to make a statement with your cell phone that is not, I spent all of the money on my new cell phone, you can take a look at the Fairphone III. Fairphone.com is the website. And it's kind of fun because if you go to the Fairphone website and you've got the Fairphone III up there, you can click on spare. Oh, there it is. Open. There we go. Spare parts, right? And I can see camera modules, speaker modules, bottom modules. Click right over there on the part that says spare parts. It's the coolest thing. Tell me the last time, if you're watching the video, if you're not watching the video at home, go to fairphone.com, go to the Fairphone III, click on spare parts, and speaker modules, the bottom module, the display, the battery. These aren't necessarily super cheap, but the fact that they offer them at all, right? It's 30 pounds for Fairphone III battery, a back cover is 25 pounds, the display module is 87 pounds. So that's for the Fairphone 2 I'm looking at now. But they offer, most of the major components, and with the idea that you can actually replace them yourself. They don't act like it's an impossibility or an insanity or crazed foolishness. And there's still a few Fairphone 1 parts that are available on that. But it's an interesting concept. And, certainly not something you're seeing from any of the ginormous cell phone manufacturers. None of them are out there going like, hey, we've got parts for you. They're going, hey, we might replace this for you. This reminds me, we had a really interesting tweet from Ergosphere, who takes some issues with my stance on right to repair. We'll put a link. One of the things he claims, and he works, if he is who he claims he is, he works in the architecture of very, very large and very, very important, the Vanguard group. He's the enterprise architect, the Vanguard group. And I'm also not trying to insult anyone by saying that, but, you never know if somebody is who they claim they are on the internet. He agrees that repair costs are crazy, and that the idea that you can't repair your iPhone from security may not be as far-fetched as I think it is. My issue is A, that Apple makes it difficult to repair products, and B, the particular sort of thing that triggered this was that if you replace the battery in an iPhone yourself, even if it is a genuine iPhone battery, that it basically, tells you there are problems and that you should go to an authorized Apple service center or go see a genius because your battery is evil. One of the things Ergosphere says, or I should say hi, BAMJ, quote, this battery could be the beachhead to pivot to fully take over your device. Security is built in depth, and the battery driver is the backdoor straight through all the layers. That's bad, but what's worse is it could just be a bug that has the same effect. You can't write software which takes all this into account. You would never actually write the code you want. You would be endlessly writing the code to protect it. You have to assume other code does its job, and by allowing untrusted code behind the layers of security, you quite literally destroy the security of the device because it's a math proof in the end. If you can't assure security by model, you can't trust the thing, and not trusting it means you can't do iMessage or Apple Pay or any number of things. So, there's he gets sort of into an extensive discussion of this, and we won't go too far on this. But he just say, I talk about it like it's just a battery. Apple is looking at it that the battery is going to compromise all of your finances, history, contacts, location, etc. But who would you blame in that case? Apple, the knockoff battery vendor, the repair person. And he says basically most people will blame Apple. I think it's an interesting argument, and I spend enough time with people who do security to be like, okay, I get what they're saying here. And if this is legit, if Apple is actually concerned about the battery being a backdoor into the system, one part of me is like, well, hey, shouldn't they actually do that and lock that down? And B, why wouldn't they have you contact an Apple Center anytime your phone is opened, not just to pull a battery in and out or something like that? Because it seems like if they're that worried about the device being compromised, any changes inside the device or even opening up the case would be a security risk, and there should be some kind of notification for that. And yeah, I do think Apple's prices for repairs are kind of outrageous, but I also think Apple's motivated to sell you new phones a lot more than they are and having you make a phone last for as long as possible. Now, is the Fairphone as nice, which is, of course, built around the idea of being easy to repair, as the Apple phone? No. I also do want to do some sort of investigation to see more about what's going on with, I find it difficult to believe that the battery could be drilling or have the ability to drill through all the layers of security, but I've often been grossly underestimating the importance of small things in terms of security and software. So it's an interesting idea. I get the challenge and I get the concerns on that. I did want to share that with the audience. I'm also really, really curious about how Apple does some things and how they determine. I'm using the feeling words in the group today. I feel that Apple often errs to sort of profit and gathering as much revenue as possible over ease of use or, the long-term survivability of hardware. But of course, I have a bias in that direction. So Google's Nest Hello Doorbell can now detect package deliveries, just so you know. Yeah.
Like the one I just received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, it will send an alert if it spots a package on your doorstep. However, only if you have a Nest Aware subscription, which starts at $5 a month. So like the Eero, the Nest is looking for more ways to make money off of you. So I just thought that was kind of amusing.
It's kind of a nice feature, though. I mean, because otherwise, how is it going to differentiate between, like, if somebody's at your door, they're either knocking, they want something, it could be the mail. If there's a package sitting there, it'd be a convenient thing. Everybody has to try to figure out how to differentiate and make that premium model work. So I'm not surprised that would be like part of the premium subscription model versus the standard model. I live based on alerts. Like I'll get an alert like your package has been delivered and I'm 60 miles away. Like, oh, great. That's a big expensive box on my front steps now. So I'm like texting people like, hey, can you go over and grab this package for me? So.
You sound like you're semi-excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's
you're
a nice
doing the
thing.
Semi-excited wobble over there. Oh,
I am.
Okay, I'm checking. It was subtle. Everybody we had some great suggestions for RP who was looking for us to expand beyond talking about performance or hardware performance as it relates to gaming and video editing, and he was looking at ideas for making SQL and Excel run faster. One of the reasons we talk so much about gaming and video editing is because there are a couple of the most demanding things you can do with a PC, and we get a lot of questions around those. We, however, do not know squat about SQL servers, unlike a lot of you out there, and Eric had some great ideas on where to start with SQL tuning. He wrote that he could only really speak to Microsoft SQL, but he would imagine many of the tuning concepts apply to other versions, and put a link to SQLskills.com, the blogs talking about weight statistics, or please tell me where it hurts. And Eric writes that SQL Server performance tuning on SQL Server can be a rat's nest. I had some consultants turn me on to weight stats. Essentially, the server will keep a diary of why it is waiting for anything in the process. These are key in finding out why SQL is slow. Could be configuration, RAM, disk, CPU, network, index tuning, etc. There are queries you can run to review the server's history, and typically this data is as good as the last reboot. So he adds a couple of links that are really great resources for things to tune in SQL, and has a few key issues that he's run into over the years. So brentazar.com/SQL/SQL-server-performance-tuning, and mssqltips.com/SQL Server Tip Category 9 Performance Tuning. We should put links to those in the show notes. Different databases for different applications on the same disk. As you could assume, a disk can only read one sector at a time. If your SQL Server has databases used for different applications, they can start fighting for resources. Sometimes it's not even another application. Microsoft SQL Server has an internal database called tempdb to offload or stage data while processing. If tempdb is on the same physical drive as your data, this can really slow you down. RAM is air for the SQL Server to breathe. It does a good job of caching common queries and data, but if you don't have enough RAM, it always has to go to disk, which is much slower. Weights will tell you if this is happening. Sometimes you just need more IOPS per second. Reviewing the server's read and write lag times can help you determine this. Index, that's for like basically faster disks, more RAM. Index maintenance. Essentially, SQL can create summaries of table information so that it can have a map to where the data is on the disk. These have to be rebuilt or reorganized on a recurring basis based on how much new data you have. Imagine adding new entries to an encyclopedia's index. There's only so much room on one page before you overflow to another page, and then it might not be in alphabetical order anymore, so it has to literally be recreated. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And then query tuning, because queries can be picky in how the data is retrieved. You may have great indexes created and think the query is using them, but based on how the query is written, they might not be used as you expect. You can see queries planned to go get your data. Microsoft SQL Server has an out-of-the-box viewer, but he prefers a free tool from SentryOne. Quote, "It has saved my life many times." It lets you see what part of the query is slowing you down. That's SentryOne.com/plan-explorer. And there's a great article in the mssqltips.com/SQL Server, how to read SQL Server graphic query execution plans. And I just want to give a shout out to Eric, especially, who I was just reading his email, and to everyone else who emailed in saying, hey, if you got SQL questions, send them my way and I'll help you out with those. As far as Excel goes, Excel's an interesting application because a lot of people who use Excel never really challenge the hardware on their PC. And for the people that really do challenge Excel with, I am using all of the cells, are usually dealing with insane amounts of data and recalculations. Not to state the obvious, but a faster processor will calculate faster. And as of Excel 2007, it can actually use multiple cores. Memory is key in keeping Excel from hitting virtual memory, which is painfully slow. If you haven't moved to the 64-bit 2016 version or later, you probably should if you're running massive calculation-heavy spreadsheets. Because if you're not, you're stuck with 4 gigabytes or less of memory to work with. Straight quote from Microsoft, a rough guideline for efficient calculation is to have enough RAM to hold the largest set of workbooks that you need to have open at the same time, plus 1 to 2 gigabytes for Excel and the operating system, plus additional RAM for any other running applications. We'll try to talk more about that in the future. But to be blunt, a lot of Excel performance is instead, once you have a later version of Excel and a multi-core processor, which hopefully everyone listening has at this point, and 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM, a lot of Excel performance is setting up your spreadsheet. there's a great article on Microsoft, improving calculation performance, or I should say Excel performance, improving calculation performance is the name of the article on Microsoft's website. And it'll give you a lot of information on how to perform the improvements and actually how to time how long it takes your spreadsheet to run so you can figure out whether or not your changes are making differences in the overall performance of your ginormous calculations on your spreadsheets. This is kind of fascinating, by the way, so thanks to RP for asking for us to spread things out a little bit. And it also amazes me that how long it took for Excel to start taking advantage of multiple core processors.
Hey, that's unbelievable.
Large amounts of
2017? So pretty much if you're not running
2007.
2007. Okay. All right. All right. That I feel slightly better now.
Would have been really funny.
Although they'd prefer if you forgot that they sold, standalone versions and just get Office 365, of course. Well, in which case you're always running whatever the newest version is. So yeah, it's probably the best optimized. One thing I'll add, it's a hardware bit that could improve performance in such things. Optane memory. So if you're on an Intel system and you have Optane memory compatibility with your motherboard and the right processor, that is something that they've actually specifically used things like Excel to show the advantage of Optane. Mostly it's just in opening a very large spreadsheet. If it's something that's actually been cached in Optane, it's significantly faster than having to go fetch it off the hard drive. And Excel spreadsheets can get big, really, really big. So that was one of the ones they always call out, a huge Excel spreadsheet. But overall, though, like you said, it's all about optimization. And then beyond optimization, just throw as much CPU and memory as possible at it. It's kind of like the phone world. You can, like Android phones, you can look at the specs and some of them have like 8 gigabytes of memory. A lot of them have 6. Some are only running 4. And at some point, those would run just as well on the lowest amount of memory if they were just highly, highly optimized to that specific set of hardware. But in the world of personal computers, your configuration is not the same as everyone else's configuration. In fact, it's almost like a fingerprint, like the particular set of components, the exact model of hard drive, how much memory and what latency it is, everything might set you just a little bit apart. So what something cannot be optimized to a very hard and fast set of hardware, then you run into the problem of having to throw more and more and more CPU cycles at it and have more and more and more memory. So unfortunately, it's kind of just the problem of optimization that will never really go away. And be interesting to see if, software could make use of, for instance, multi-threading. Being more multi-threaded will help performance. So I'm sure SQL, depending on what platform you're on, is probably already doing this. I know nothing about that. It is fascinating to think that until the widespread adoption of multi-core CPUs, people were still, even in the Core 2 Duo era, they were still running single-threaded Excel everywhere in businesses all over the world.
Right. Well, code changes slower than you think it will. Yeah, I was also kind of fascinated. I'm looking for the. It's amazing how intense. It's amazing how intense. Spreadsheets can get if you're working with people that are doing like massive business plans and stuff. But yeah, for most versions of Excel, a faster processor will, of course, enable faster Excel calculation. For most large workbooks, the calculation performance gains from multiple processors scale almost linearly with the number of physical processors. However, hyperthreading of physical processors only produces a small performance gain. So real cores are more important than fake cores. And this is out of that Excel performance improving calculation performance, which is a scintillating read. Make sure you're not paging to a virtual memory file. If you don't have, at least like a 2016 version, like a 2013 or 2016 version of Excel, and you need the 64-bit version for taking advantage of all of the memory. The micro timer function is kind of fascinating to me because it will actually measure the calculation time for stuff. It's like everything else in computing, you can nerd pretty hard as you get deep into Excel. Oh, my goodness. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware also brought to you by Plex. Plex brings together all the media that matters to you in a single app available on any device, no matter where you are. Organize and stream your personal collection of movies, TV shows, music, and photos for free. You can also stream your favorite podcast, web series, and news free. And if you upgrade to the Plex Pass for less than $5 a month, you'll get the best of Plex with exclusive and early access to premium features like offline accessibility. Plex allows you to download your movies, your shows, your music, and photos to your mobile devices for offline enjoyment wherever you go. You can watch live broadcast TV and DVR with the Plex Pass, an antenna, and a tuner. Stop paying for cable and still enjoy great TV. Premium music, features like lyrics and custom curated playlists based on your music preferences. Get cinema-like experience when you're watching your personal movie collection, including trailers, behind-the-scenes features, and never-before-seen footage. Multiple users are not a problem. You can create customized, managed accounts and make switching users easy with Plex Home. They even have parental controls so you can safely let the little ones enjoy the Plex experience, too. With Plex Pass, you also get Plex Pass Perks, where you get exclusive access to promos and discounts on partner products, and you get to use the newest features before everyone else. Cut the cable cord and save big. Plex is offering Twit listeners a 30-day free trial of Plex Pass, which gives you access to all their premium features. Go to plex.tv/twit and enter the code TWIT to start your free trial of Plex Pass today. That's plex.tv/twit. And we want to thank Plex for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Sebastian, you were having some fun with the Be Quiet Dark Rock 4 and Pro 4, which dovetails nicely into last week's conversation about cheap cooling versus expensive cooling. Are these quieter? Are these cooler? Are they more awesome? I actually really like the all of the engineering on the fans on these Be Quiet coolers. Also, they're very stealthy and black.
They're all black.
Tactical.
Yes, that was their whole thing. I mean, they just started selling white fans, which is unprecedented for them, just like they have occasionally released a white case. But Be Quiet, which is a German company, I think they're the #1 manufacturer of power supplies in Germany. And they've got their start making these noise-reducing panels for the inside of your case. Their fans are among the quietest I've ever heard. They're right up there with Noctua for ultra-silent performance. Right. They have their own technologies, their own things. They use fluid dynamic bearings. They have these sort of interesting fan blades that reduce drag and reduce noise. Their heat sinks, though, on these Dark Rock series, because they have a more budget-minded series. Dark Rock is their premium line, and they go all the way up to the Dark Rock Pro 4, which is, I think it sells for $89. So it's right up there with the Noctua NHD 15 cooler. It's a twin tower air cooler of significant size, prodigious size. So if you have the room in your case for something that's going to stand around 162 millimeters, I think was the height on this, but occupy most of the top half of your motherboard in the process, you can get performance that is pretty much in line with even a 240 millimeter all-in-one cooler, though I do need to get some of those back on the test bench and re-benchmark them with a new processor and kind of reestablish baselines again. But in my 5-year history of testing coolers, really large designs like this tend to be just as good as an all-in-one solution for less money, because a really powerful all-in-one cooler still costs between $100 and $150, and these are in that 90 and under range. The non-pro version of these Dark Rock 4 coolers is $75. But just comparing them against recently tested coolers on the exact same platform, which would include such stalwarts as the Hyper 212 Evo and its more contemporary, upgraded version, the Hyper 212, if I can remember this, Black Edition. I used the RGB Black Edition, though, to add a little color to the review. But if you look at these Be Quiet coolers, they are cooler. True to their name, they are very quiet.
This is good.
They're the quietest of this little bunch. They're also the best performing of this little group. But of course, I didn't test a Noctua cooler against these, which I got to hear about a little bit, and I get it. And I think a D15 would be a great comparison point with these. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the D15 and the Pro 4 were pretty much neck and neck. But some people are put off by Noctua's color scheme. So if that's an issue for you. We're talking about a cooler that's rated for up to a 250 watt TDP. And in fact, they have a Threadripper specific version of it that is just out of the box, ready to clamp down on your TR4 mount. That's sold as a separate purchase. This is like the basic one that works with everything, comes with a variety of different mounting hardware options to get it going on even an older system or the newest AM4 or socket 2066. So impressive performance. I'll kind of temper my enthusiasm until I can test some really big Noctua and some other coolers against these. But of the coolers tested in the last year or so, they were the coolest and the quietest at the same time. So always nice. Plus that dark aesthetic is nice. Like it's very stealthy and just doesn't really stand out, even though it is huge. The Pro 4, a twin tower cooler, is a large cooler.
So you're basically saying 162 millimeters high, it'll handle 250 watt. We haven't seen anything that hot, in at least not rated by the manufacturer. Maybe one of us.
Yes.
I mean, I was about to say, 150 watts is the highest thing we've seen in years, except we've seen 150 watt parts, TDP parts, running at in excess of 200 watts.
Do you remember the FX? What was it? The AMD FX Series 9590 CPU that had a 220 watt TDP. No board, no combination of board that had the beefiest VRMs available for that platform. 990FX, I think, was it was a socket AM3. Nothing that I tested, including this ASRock Fatality board, that supposedly had this great VRM on it, and using, I think it was a Corsair H105. This is the stuff that gets saved in my brain, by the way. Testing I did in 2015 on an FX 9590 processor, desperately trying to keep it from throttling, and nothing that I did would do so. And the Core i9 9900K is kind of encroaching on that territory if you overclock it. And of course, out of the box, it runs a lot closer to, say, 100, 140 watts. I want to say that, rather hilariously, that has a 95 watt TDP, whereas, say, a Ryzen 9 3900X is 105 watt TDP. But the 9900K will just take all of the power you have available if you're doing any kind of all core boost lock kind of stuff on it. Like, it will do single core boosts close to 5 gigahertz, but unless you go in and manually do a multi-core enhancement on your motherboard or do a manual overclock to get all of those cores boosting towards 5 gigahertz, the thing will pull 200 watts easily. And that's so your total power from the wall with a 9900K overclocked is outrageous. It looks like a GPU is running a gaming benchmark. But I did, in this review, briefly test the 9900K with the Dark Rock Pro 4, and with the fans maxed out, it kept it to about 75, 77 degrees in a reasonable room temperature of about 25 C. When I overclocked it, I think I just briefly mentioned, I immediately hit TJ max. That's the thermal junction maximum temperature where the thing starts to throttle. So that's, I think, 100 degrees with the 9900K, somewhere around there. Once you hit triple digits, bad things start to happen. And even with the Pro 4, I was getting 99 to 100 degrees overall package temperature, with some cores hitting as high, I think, as 101 or something, and then the rest of them hitting high 90s. But it wasn't throttling perceptibly, but just in a quick 5-minute transcode test, it certainly would over a longer period of time. But that was very astutely pointed out to me by one of our readers, that if you're dealing with a processor that has, and I think we talked about this before when we were talking about liquid cooling, that has any kind of thermal interface material and then a heat spreader on top, you're never really going to be able to get the efficiency out of your cooler that you would if you were straight on the die. But then delidding becomes very risky, and you
I
can
don't know.
crack
There's
your CPU.
There's a delidding tool. There's a delidding tool on Amazon right now, and I'm sorely tempted to buy it just to see what happens.
I would have a hard time trying delidding for the first time on a $500 CPU like 9900K. But hey, if you're willing to do it, go for it, because you're only going to get better temps out of that thing. But I think the real problem for it is what? What's the model?
No, keep going.
I was going to say the only real issue, as we talk over each other again, is just the amount of power that's being pushed into this thing to get those clock speeds at the current process node, which of course is 14 nanometer for these desktop parts.
There you have it. I'm just laughing because it's like I just dropped a link in the show notes. The Amazon.com Rocket 88 delid and relid for LGA 1150 and 1151, which says
it's safest and easiest method to delid your Intel CPU.
There you have it. I like
they precision build it.
I'm just amused that the if you scroll down a little bit, you see the copper upgrade kit for the LGA 1151, and frequently bought together the Thermal Grizzly Conductonaut thermal grease paste right up there with the Permatex 82180 Ultra Black Maximum Oil Resistance RTB silicone gasket maker, which is something I've spent some quality time with while sealing oil pans on diesel trucks. So it's very exciting. The copper upgrade kit looks absolutely fantastic. DAS Keyboard 4Q and X50Q. I was thinking of DAS Keyboard as being, I have one that I inherited from a friend of mine as being completely black, because they're sort of the hacker keyboard of choice, and devoid of any markings and any LEDs, and certainly a volume knob. What was the word on the 4Q and the 50Q, which are obviously not completely black keyboards?
No,
and
these were
LEDs.
Far more mainstream for DOS, certainly. And like you said, they were known for that. When a few years ago, I remember they were that weird keyboard company that sold keyboards that didn't even have letters on the keys. So you actually,
oh yeah, I have one in a box.
Yeah, and this is RGB backlit, full media keys, macros, all that stuff. And if that weren't enough of a departure, and I think they have some other keyboards at this point that have RGB lighting, what they did, because this was part of a crowdfunding campaign, I think way back in 2016, perhaps. And when this finally came to market, I want to say it was last year, it already seemed to me to be a very dated concept, which was take the fact that there's lighting with your keyboard, some sort of LED indicator being used for notifications is not new, and we saw phones with that. I really missed the blinking LED notification system that they had on earlier Nexus phones, which of course is no longer really used anymore. But the idea of these devices is that you connect with one of the services that enables you to have notifications for various things passed through them. And then you will have a certain key or combination of keys, whatever you desire, light up on your keyboard to let you know that something just happened. So it might be a blinking letter to let you know you just got a new email, or your garage door is unlocked. Somebody's opening your garage door, so your escape key starts blinking at you. So it's interesting, but it's interesting in kind of an early 2000s way to me, where what if one of the keys on your keyboard would light up and let you know you got a new email, as if anybody reading this review or listening to us talk right now doesn't have a smartphone that gives them notifications for things. So if you're like most people these days, and I think it's to the point where the vast majority has some sort of smartphone for their phone, then it makes less sense to me why you would have a very premium product, as in pricing. MSRP on both of these was $200 when they came out. They've since dropped to I think $160 and $170. But there's no screen on it. There's no notification window. We've seen some recently launched Asus laptops that have a second screen above the keyboard to do things like this, to let you follow along with another either application or what have you on a lower screen while your primary display is doing whatever work you're doing. So, I think we've even seen keyboards that had ridiculously expensive keyboards, but had individually, like each key was its own screen. So that kind of is interesting too. But it's just, I don't know. I look at this and it's, okay, you're changing. So if I have this all set to green and then I start typing and then one of the keys starts blinking red at me, that tells me that it's a notification. If I remember that the P is a new email, then okay, P is blinking. I was just, that must mean I got a new email. So, and I think initially when this launched, it wasn't even as simple as, oh, it's blinking, tap that key and it will launch the program. They weren't even doing that. It was, this is blinking, open the monitoring application that shows me that this IFFT service says that Gmail sent me a new message.
I feel comfortable in saying that you are somewhat less than impressed with this.
Yeah, it might be useful for somebody. And Chris, who wrote this up for us, did a nice job of trying to be diplomatic about it at times. But really, it's a fairly useless feature for a keyboard that must then cost like upwards of $160 to incorporate this. Plus, then there's the added problem of it doesn't just work. It works if you sign up for a service, and granted, a free service, but still, you're having to give a certain amount of control and monitoring to a third party to then look at, okay, what is happening with my social media account? What is happening with my email account? They were kind of nice. They were nice things like just out of the box. You could enable a stand reminder. You could enable weather reporting and just like put in your zip code and tell it where you lived. But still, does a blinking key telling me what the current temperature is? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, unless it was like going back, if it's 76 degrees, the 7 and 6 keys are blinking, but is it 76 or 67 degrees? I guess you have to open up the weather applet to find out. But yeah, it seems like a gimmick, and it kind of blows my mind that this was successfully crowdfunded like 3 years ago and became a product you go out and buy last year. But
you know, times change.
They do.
They do. Oh my goodness. Surface fans, rejoice. There's a special Surface hardware event in New York City in October. If you're a fan of Microsoft Surface laptops, October 2nd is a day of excitement for you. Tom Warren over at The Verge thinks we might see a new dual screen Surface. So this is the legendary Centaurus, which they've been working on for approximately forever, or 2 years as the case may be, which seems to be forever in computing. If you have a question, by the way, twitch@twit.tv is the email address to reach us, or you can tweet at Patrick Norton or at Sebastian Peak. I bring that up because we got an email from Randy. Randy needs to keep a MacBook Pro 2012 alive and needs to keep it running on Mavericks. And I've been in the situation where I needed to keep a older piece of hardware on a particular operating system, for example, for a dongle related application that was going to be prohibitive or unnecessary to replace. He had some concerns about finding a compatible SSD. What did you find out in looking at that? Because he was frustrated because all of the SSD options he could find required him to upgrade to a more recent Mac OS. What did you find out when you got behind the scenes on Randy's question, Sebastian?
Well, the key there, and the beautiful part of his question to me was he said 2012. Because if you're not familiar with the MacBook Pro line, starting in 2013, when they introduced the Retina screen, they also started using PCI Express storage. And Apple, being Apple, does not use an industry standard connector for their PCI Express storage. They don't use M.2. It's still an NVMe drive, but it's using a proprietary connector. And I've seen some adapters out there. They do add to the overall length of the SSD. And some of them have some issues with, I think, power states and actually talking to the motherboard the way that Apple intends. So maybe some of the pinouts are wrong. So stay away from those. But the wonderful thing here, 2012, they were still using SATA drives. And what was surprising to me in his question was he said he found compatible SSDs from OWC. And if you're not familiar, OWC, which is I think MacSales.com. They've been selling third-party memory upgrades for Apple computers for many years. They have their own branded SSDs and a bunch of other stuff, usually for significantly less money than Apple would charge you for a similar upgrade. But they were telling him he needed to have a more recent version of Mac OS than Mavericks. And Mavericks was one of the last versions of Mac OS. I can see why he'd want to stay on it, even if it's not application specific. Mavericks still had certain things which have been kind of toned down as they've sort of started to blend Mac OS with iOS a bit. And like, for instance, you still had a full disk utility back then. But regardless of the reason he wants to stay on Mavericks, there really isn't a compatibility problem as long as he's using a SATA SSD. And even if OWC is telling you, oh, you need to have a newer version of Mac OS for us to support you, that could be a couple of things. One of the things I thought of was it might just be that they're done with supporting older OSs, because that would involve extended training for previous versions. There was a pretty big difference between Mac OS Mavericks and the current iterations of it post El Capitan. So it could just be they don't want to support it. It could also be related to the controller and whether or not the Mac is going to pass along the trim command. And if you've followed SSD hardware reviews over the last decade, you'll know that trim is this thing that basically is like a software and hardware level garbage collection, sort of cleans up the drive and it restores performance. Although a lot of modern SSD controllers, and talking to our old storage editor, Alan, they do a lot of this on their own. And depending on the controller, it's doing things like wear leveling, where it's trying to use different blocks of NAND instead of hitting the same thing over and over again. There's over provisioning, where there's additional storage that's physically there, but not actually partitioned as part of your drive. But then the controller can say, we'll use some of that extra that's over provisioned on the actual PCB, and that will kind of restore performance once a certain block has reached kind of its end of life. So there's different things going on, even like background garbage collection, where it goes around and kind of restores performance when you're at idle. That can happen at controller level. Apple does have trim as part of OS X, and it's something where you had to have an Apple OEM SSD. If you installed a third-party SSD, even if it was compatible, Apple would turn off trim on the drive, which is, annoying, because they want you to buy an Apple SSD. So there were workarounds to this, and I think in the Mavericks era, there was still a working application that will let you force the trim command even on a non-Apple drive. But regardless, SATA is SATA, is what I told him. And if you find a good deal on a SATA drive and you're running a 2.5-inch spinning drive, swap out the two. You can install OS X on any SATA SSD. I've done many upgrades for people over the years where we either completely swapped out the drive on a MacBook Pro of that era, because like 2009 to 2012 was when I was helping a lot of people with MacBook Pros, and they all worked. Corsair, Kingston, like a SanDisk drive, Crucial drives, any imaginable drive just worked because it's using industry standard interface protocols at that point. The only issue becomes, will the OS pass along a trim command or not, and can you force it? As I was saying in a very long-winded way, most controllers these days do a pretty good job of managing their own NAND and its performance. So you don't see the huge performance degradation you once did back in like 2010 if you're running a third-party SSD on a Mac and saw your speeds drop pretty consistently over time and couldn't really do anything about it. So hopefully that answered his question. But yeah, just get an SSD, put it in. You're so lucky that you have a Mac that has a user serviceable 2.5-inch drive, because that is definitely a thing of the past.
And that's one of the things to go on another tangent that I'll try not to make too long. Is one of the frustrating things about so many laptops today is that your storage may be permanently, in many cases, is probably permanently soldered to the motherboard. Certainly the memory is on smaller laptops more often than not. And if you do think you're going to want to add more memory in the future, or if you do look at this bargain laptop and think, well, yeah, I could probably make 256 gigabytes work, until I upgrade. Make sure that upgrading is actually an option, because in many cases these days, you have memory or storage permanently soldered to the motherboard. And well, I'm sure someone is going to email Twitch at twitch.tv how they had upgraded the permanently soldered memory or storage on their motherboard. The vast majority of people out there do not have the skill or the tools to do something like that. So 3 cheers for upgradability and repairability, and 1 small warning that you should be careful before you buy a new laptop if you think you're going to need more storage or memory. Goodness. There's something going on in the backyard, which hopefully is the roofers trimming something in the backyard in the house next to ours, and not a very large animal crawling through the hedge and preparing to kill me. So if I suddenly disappear in a haze of blood with a mountain lion, that's what it was. Not to randomly digress, but I randomly digress. If you have never heard about this podcast, it is not about mountain lions or being eaten by mountain lions. It is actually about computer hardware, desktop, laptops, phones, consoles. We get excited about all this stuff. And if you have a question, you can email twitch at twitch.tv. If you're curious who you've been listening to, I'm Patrick Norton, and he's Sebastian Peak, and you can find more about this show, including how to subscribe and all the older episodes at twit.tv/twitch. The name is This Week in Computer Hardware, but TWICH is so much easier to say. And we want to thank each and every one of you for listening. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Sebastian Peak.
We'll catch you next week on Twitch.